Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Today's show is brought to you by OnPay, the new standard in payroll. You can pay employees and contractors in minutes, automate your payroll taxes and filings, as well as provide health benefits and HR in all 50 states. For more information, visit buildingthefutureshow.com/onpay. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Jim McConnell. He's the president of StreamTek Productions. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at StreamTek is very cool and very much relevant to, you know, how the world is right now. And you offer a really good tool to help people stream their video and make it more exciting than just a boring Zoom call. But maybe before we get into all that fun stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Yep, sure. I grew up actually in Syracuse, New York.
Okay, very cool.
And went to college at Clarkson University, got a business degree. So I'm not really a film or video creative person in terms of how I started my career, but ended up getting in the oil business.
Okay. Chasing
oil rigs around South Texas for a few years and hanging out with roughnecks and talking to people named Shorty. And then went up to North Dakota for about a year and a half and worked the oil business up there. It was a great experience. And then finally wound up in Denver during the oil boom in the early 80s and worked for a company that was a leader in directional drilling. So my first 10 years was not really involved in this type of stuff. But when the boom went bust in Denver, I wanted to stay here. Wasn't apt to move back to Texas or Oklahoma. So I changed careers and basically did a Wayne's World, if your audience is familiar with that movie.
Yep.
And Wayne, if you remember, was a community access television guy, right? Wayne
Yep.
and Garth. And that's exactly what I did in '86. Denver had just had a big contract for cable. It was one of the first in the country, and they had one of the best community access channels, and just had an interest in this all the time. So I kind of had some time and money and jumped into that, and the rest is history.
Very cool. So walk us through your video career up until founding your own companies with Greenworks and StreamTek Productions.
Yeah, sure. It was actually after I did, I created shows called Denver Talks and a few other things, and it was really a lot of fun. But it wasn't going to make me any money. So through some contacts, which included a brother-in-law, they're always helpful sometimes, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, got a job with a company called Aon Corporation, which many people may know if they're in insurance, but it's one of the largest, and I don't know where they're at now, but largest global insurance brokerage and financial companies in the world. They're out of Chicago, but they had a local office here with a guy that had been the film commissioner in Arizona. Believe it or not, he always had this interest in video content for underwriting presentations. And mind you, this was '86, so he was a little ahead of the curve. And we had dinner, and I told him what I like to do. And so he hired me here locally to produce some content. And it just kind of took off after several months. Corporate found out about it and liked what we were doing. And so I spent the next, probably 10 years or so working as the director of video services for Aon during the late 80s to 90s. producing content literally all over the world. And that was a lot of fun. And what it really did more than anything is it got me to really understand the corporate culture, communications training, that kind of thing, as it related to their business and how to creatively produce this stuff. So I very much enjoyed it, more so than the commercial work I was exposed to beforehand, just because producing commercials and stuff like that with directors can be an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. And this was a little more business oriented. So I left them in '97, just as the digital kind of component of things was starting to evolve and take over, and started my own company, New West Media. And at that point, actually got involved in a PBS pilot documentary called that I produced called "Building the Information Superhighway."
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember it was all called that. And so I spent about a year on that project, and that really changed my thinking about the whole video process. Even back then, we were pushing video with some engineers in Cerritos, some GE engineers and Hewlett Packard, and all these people at that point were looking at getting into all this stuff. You know, it didn't all turn out the way we would want it to, but I think we're there at this point. But so I could really clearly see at that point down the road, it occurred to me immediately, like, God, we're all going to have our own TV channel if this stuff keeps up. So at any rate, that documentary that we worked on was fascinating. We interviewed all sorts of people, the chairman of Discovery TV to Timothy Leary. I had a 2-hour interview with Timothy Leary.
Sure, that's very cool.
That was just amazing. Yeah. And that kind of catapulted New West Media. And I spent another 10 years or so really doing that as a production company, independent production company here in Denver. And then I met a business partner and a couple other people, and we created a company called Greenworks Video in early 2000, and 2000s, probably 2004, 2005. And that was a green screen studio, pretty innovative for the time. And we created a ton of content, studio quality stuff for a very inexpensive way using technology, the evolving HD technology. And we're pretty successful with that. But I tend to like to keep moving the ball forward. And I kind of went back to those early days when I was doing the documentary, and that whole thing about live video and over the internet really eating at me. So about 3 or 4 years ago, we created a sister company off of that, which is now more the main company that I work, called StreamTek Productions, which really specialized in what we would call streaming video. But for us, streaming video is kind of, it's just boring, let's face it, in some ways, with a single camera and a static shot. I mean, the Super Bowl would be boring if all we had was a static shot. So we wanted to bring more broadcast values to it. So our motto basically is stop streaming, start broadcasting. So StreamTek was about using multiple cameras, graphics, digital effects, and all sorts of stuff within live events, from corporate to associations or nonprofits doing award ceremonies, whatever it was. This is kind of where we were pushing the ball, so to speak. And that's really the space that StreamTek's involved in, and that's what we're kind of excited about going forward.
Oh, very cool. Because, well, I think even a lot of shows these days that were shot in a studio with like huge budgets are basically doing what you just outlined nowadays, right? Like there's certain shows that are basically doing these, like everybody's at home and maybe there's a couple people in person, and yeah, they're editing in pre-shot stuff, obviously live stuff, and a bunch of other stuff. So how do you guys work with a company or an organization to make that happen for them?
So we really look at the market two-way. As if we have two markets. There's corporate communications, and then there's what we would call events or event planners.
Okay.
And in corporate communications, we basically come in for what they produce, which would be what they stream or have meetings about now. It's more of a one-to-many, where the CEO is making an address, or perhaps it's a town hall meeting or something where they have to get their message across. And let's face it, the way that a lot of those are done now is much like a webinar, where there's a single camera, single shot of the presenter, and sometimes they even wide enough to get the PowerPoint if they can't integrate it. And sometimes it's a technical snafu, and we all know about that. So anything would be boring. Even the Super Bowl would be boring if all you had was one wide static shot on the field, for instance.
Sure.
It's the way our brains are wired. What we want is something more sophisticated. It's what brings us and what engages us. So we bring more of a broadcast model, meaning we'll use multiple cameras, 3, 4, 5 cameras, show different shots, have digital effects, bring in graphics, and produce a town hall meeting, for instance, like a TV show. And the idea there is you have a much more engaged audience. In fact, we had a Fortune 500 company that we did a test, a side-by-side test. They had always used their teleconferencing capabilities, which again is that single camera type of thing, to broadcast out to their audience of 30,000 people worldwide. And we came in with that approach and was wildly successful, but we wanted to get empirical data. So we set up a couple of key offices, I think 11 or 12, and we basically broadcasted the way they normally do, and then broadcasted the way we were. And, the vote was 12-0 in our favor, that it was much more engaged. People loved it. The feedback was good. And it makes sense, Kevin. It's just, like I said, just think of any live TV or event or something you're watching. I mean, it's just, that's why they have multiple cameras. Our brains are wired that pulls us in. So our motto, stop streaming, start broadcasting, is really about, start engaging your audience. So the corporate communications is a little different because they have different requirements and needs they need met, and it's more that type of thing. Whereas event planners, and if you think about that, right now as we talk, we're in the middle of this pandemic still, and event planners, if you think about it, Kevin, are like at the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
I mean, these people have lost these are people who have been in the business 30 years, 40 years, some of them, and what are they planning? There's no logistics because there's no live events, and the move to virtual events is not really good for them. This is all online, and they have to kind of adjust, and so it's a really difficult situation. So with event planners, our approach now is to, again, come in to them and say, okay, you can't do 1,000 people anymore for this big major fundraiser. But, maybe you can have 50 people in a space that you design and you treat like a television studio. You throw in a couple, maybe a Jack and Jill, a couple of people that can interview and move around. You invite some VIPs, maybe a few people get awards, and you produce it like a TV show. So now instead of the virtual talking heads, Zoom kind of conference look that we're all pretty much over at this point, you create TV.
Right.
And you can still reach, but now you're doing it in an engaging way that flows like TV. And so for that group of people, it's been we've gotten a great response. We're like a lifeline to many of them. They're really enthusiastic about this approach, and the numerous proposals that they've given out, most of them, I would say, maybe 75% of them are being accepted by their clients. So it's a new world, and we're pretty excited about the possibilities. Like anything else now, there's a lot of question marks. There's no playbooks, right?
Yeah.
So for us, that's pretty exciting. We're pretty comfortable. Technically, we can pull it off, but the execution on the other end of this, just what's the audience going to think, is is soon to be determined. But the initial stuff, it really looks great.
No, that's really cool. So, do you guys, are you guys willing to basically go wherever people need, or are you only doing in America or Denver, or what geographical regions do you usually try to work in?
Yeah, well, global travel right now is just, we did something in Switzerland last year.
Okay.
And a couple years ago, we did 2 things in Japan. But right now, global travel is just...
It's not happening.
It's not going to happen. We certainly have traveled plenty of places within the U.S.
Okay.
And we have not done any during the pandemic, but even with the stuff I was telling you about with corporate community and all that, it's not like anybody's moving today. We have a lot of stuff coming up later in the summer. So,
right.
But all of it right now is in Denver.
Okay.
So Colorado, this area, we've got something up in Wyoming, I think, in 2 months, is where we're focused during this time, because a lot of what we also want to do is learn a lot of things. And this is a great breeding ground for that, quite frankly. So but we absolutely are national in scope. The issue then becomes cost.
Right.
So our costs are very affordable. You can produce content, have us come in and produce a show like this for literally a tenth of what it used to be 10 years ago. The costs are very, very low. We've really kind of flattened out the hierarchy of producing something by using robotic cameras and something that used to take me a dozen or so people before, now I can do with 2 or 3 people, and so it's a lot easier. So in that sense, travel is also a lot easier. I don't have a truckload of equipment. I got stuff that can almost be literally, not maybe carry on, but checked. So we can move, but it's just, this early on still, the way we look at it, we're not crazy about doing it, but absolutely, if someone's interested, we would definitely talk to them and love to come out there and give them some numbers and do it. So
sure. So do you have some like rough costs of what it costs, or does it really depend on what people are looking to do?
Yeah. There's some things like, Kevin, like in the corporate communications realm, let's say.
Sure. That's
pretty easy to just kind of qualify, because the typical corporate, let's say we're talking about a typical financial quarterly meeting that a corporation would do to broadcast everyone, right?
Okay, yeah.
So we'll take that as our example in the corporate communications area. So that's generally something that's an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Sure.
So we can come in there and shoot that, and let's say in this case too, you got someone at a podium, or sometimes they're on stools or something, having a little panel Q&A, but everything's within that space. So we can do this with 3 cameras, and we use robotic cameras because no one's really moving a lot, and we can still follow them with robotic cameras, but we can preset 2 shots and 3 shots, and you make it look like it's a bunch of, as many angles as you want. And I can have 1 camera operator. So, and then I have that's operating all the cameras, and then I have 1 person that's switching the show, so to speak, bringing in graphics and what have you. So in those scenarios, that's kind of a basic setup: 3 cameras, 2 techs. Our cost to produce a show is less than $4,000. Sometimes closer to 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's very cost affordable.
So that's what you. It's affordable to any company with even some remote employees or something that wants to do this. It's very easy, yeah. And then you can just add on from there, if you have to have us create content or whatever. So we started at very affordable base. And the reason for that, like I said, is these guys can set that up in an hour and a half. So I don't have to, if this thing's at 1 o'clock, we can literally come in there in the morning, set it up, do all the testing, have everything kind of dialed in, shoot it, and be out of there by 3 or 3:30. that's not like it used to be where we have to come in and like an AV company would think of that, and you're setting up and you're spending a half day setup and, testing, and you got a video engineer. No, we don't have to do that anymore. And that's connecting the dots using the right technology, right internet platforms. And thank God, the networks have gotten much more robust and strong and stable now. So that allows us to be able to do this with a high degree of integrity.
No, I think that's awesome. I think that's really great. So I'm curious, though, to get your thoughts on, like, other than cost and the technology is moving like crazy, how have you seen the industry evolve even just over the last 5 or 10 years? Because so many people just stream their content or whatever from the internet now, right? Like, they've cut some of the traditional medias. So how has things changed, and where do you think things might go in the space?
Yeah. Boy, that's a big question, but I'll try to make it as small as I can. But
Sure.
Yeah, it's a great question, Kevin. I mean, one of the things I would look at is, to what degree is the permanence of people working from home?
Right.
Okay? I don't know. I think we can all agree that this whole grand experiment for the last almost 3 months, let's say, about people working at home, and I call it the grand experiment because, in my opinion, telecommuting, we should have been doing to this degree 10 years ago, literally. I have never understood why work, however you want to look at it, wasn't a bigger slice of the workforce.
Sure.
It has driven me crazy, particularly from a standpoint of congested highways and air pollution.
Yeah.
It's been one of my pet peeves.
Well, I 100% agree with you. And then I also think it's just like, as somebody, like, as my day job, I work as on the design side at a startup. It's always funny to me how so many companies are like, you need to work 9 to 5 in an office, and we expect you to be creative, or like other people that, in a lot of cases, it's not about a certain time period of the day. It's like, I'm not a morning person. Like, some of my best creative work happens at like 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock in the evening. So why would you try to force me to work at 9 to 5 when my most creative time is like almost like middle of the night,
Absolutely.
So,
you're right. And what it is digital has allowed us to do that.
Totally.
Now, what I believe the reason why we're have until maybe now, it's an archaic management style that's industrial based and not digital based.
Totally.
So I have always seen it that way. When I had the discussion or the debate with people, it's always been that. Because everybody says, well, yeah, how come? Because my argument was always, how many of us get up in the morning, get on our laptop, look at so we get on, we stare at a screen, and then we get in our car, we go we put our coat up, we sit down at a desk, stare at a screen for 8 hours, go home. As soon as we get home, stare at a screen for a little bit, and go to bed. So I was like, what's the deal with that? I don't get it. They're working on a screen and a keyboard. So why isn't it? What's the point of getting in your car and driving to a building and all the energy and time and what's the 8 to 5? And so the argument has always been that, well, we're not sure people will be productive, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's it.
Totally.
That's kind of what it is. And the reason why they can be productive is because we're lording over them. We're physically managing them. They're all in the same place. And it's like, I don't know if your audience is aware of Nicholas Negroponte, maybe you are, but it's the difference between bits and atoms, right?
Yep.
So the industrial is more about atoms, people physically being there, and bits are about, you don't have to be. So, so the silver lining in this pandemic has been that, so nobody wanted to test it. I mean, there's teleworking. It's been a small amount of it. By the way, all the tests showed, whether it's San Antonio or Silicon Valley and all these places where they've really studied it, have shown that productivity, at the very least, isn't affected, and in many cases is increased. To your point about whenever you're more productive and having the freedom to do that. So But the problem was we weren't moving off the schneid, right?
Yeah.
It was crazy. So this pandemic, and that's what I said earlier, that's where I started it, has been, whether we like it or not, we were thrown into the grand experiment. It's like, well, I know everybody was hesitant about doing it, but now you had no choice, right?
Yep.
And sometimes it takes something that big to move the needle forward, right?
Sure.
So I know this is a long answer to your question.
It's good. It's good.
But but I think, so for me, it's how much permanence is going to be there by next year.
Sure.
And I'm hopeful, because I got to be honest with you. Let's say you're, the CEO of a company that employs 3,000 people or something, and you got 3 floors or whatever, downtown Denver, let's say, and all of a sudden, and you weren't doing a lot of teleworking. You're that you're that mindset I was talking about. Well, after 3 months, you're looking. Let's say there's enough time to see if everybody's doing their job and stuff's productive. And for the most part, let's say it is, and they're like, this works. Well, let me ask you this: are you going to go talk to your commercial real estate and sign up for 3 floors again, or are you going to start to think, we can do this with 1 floor? Because I also got to figure out, how am I going to work people in and out with the new socially distancing restrictions? Yep. I got to reconfigure 3 floors. So you start to think from an operation standpoint, this is messy. Then I ask you, Kevin, then why would you go back to doing the way? Why wouldn't you say, hey, boy, we pulled this off. I wasn't sure, but man, my people are productive. I'm going to talk to my lease person and say, we don't need all that space. And in fact, I'm going to start to think this way about all sorts of stuff.
Sure. Well, the other thing that I never understood is it's not that hard to not work in an office too. Like, just because you're sitting at a computer in your chair doesn't mean you're working. Like, sure, I'm at an office. Like, it's not that hard, right? Like, everybody's done it. And so majority of people that work an office job have deliverables. And sure, you can maybe screw around for a few days, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe even longer than that. But eventually, whether you're at home or at work, people are going to figure out that you're not doing anything, right? Like, it has nothing to do with where you're located. Like, eventually people will figure it out. And majority of people that sit in a office, like, they're working on a piece of a bigger project. And if their piece doesn't get done in the time that they're supposed to get it done, you can figure out who's the bottleneck very quickly, right? And so I never really understood that. And you're right. I think these kind of archaic mindsets around working are going to have to die off, because the best people in any industry that have the option to work at home are going to pick working from home. And they might choose to come into the office a day or two a week. Some of them might never. But I think if you don't let people have this freedom that they've proved to you that they can work in, they're just going to go to some other company or your competition that allows them to have the freedoms that they want.
Well, and turning that around, and I couldn't agree with you more, but turning that around, Kevin, let's say that the persons, whatever, have proved their productivity hasn't been affected.
Sure.
Then let me ask you, what's in favor of you as the CEO, who's ever in charge of it? What's on the pro side for you to move them back in the office?
There's none, other than you lording over them.
I can't think of any. You seem like an intelligent guy. I feel fairly. I mean, that's what I think we may be in the midst of here. That's where that change. They're going to start to think, because everybody's got a plan for this return.
Yep.
I am very hopeful that for the most part, that's how it's going to come up on the pros and cons. It's going to be like, okay, what's the pro of going back, of moving by 20? Let's just say 20 or 25% of the people that I know could absolutely do this out of the home. No hit to our productivity, the flow of everything, and what's the pro to bring them back in?
No, 100%.
I don't see it.
Well, the other thing that's interesting too is if, for example, people working from home, say they lose 15% in productivity. Let's just say, I'll just pick a random number. But if you save 20% in office space costs, you're actually still ahead, right? Like there's these like
not necessarily.
Well, I guess
the only thing I would say to that is depends on how
there's
big
caveats
that 15% of productivity affected the overall.
No, sure,
you
but
know,
you know what I'm trying to get at, right? Like there's ways to get around people that do lose productivity. You can make up the cost savings in other ways, right?
And look, this is a management issue anyway. The way I would do it would say, because, and you alluded to it earlier, this is not a black and white thing. In fact,
sure.
In my world, the way I would say is, first and foremost, let's say there's 50% of people. I would say, okay, 50% of my employees could do the work at home. So I'll go to the other 50%, I'll make the announcement, and they're going to get it. It's like, hey, you got to come into work. But the other 50%, my first step would be, who wants to volunteer? So that would be number one, to come back into the office. What do you want to do? So the first step is because to be honest with you, there's going to be a lot of people that, and I already know, miss the office environment, miss the socializing. Some of them, unfortunately, miss the drama, whatever. But they want to be there, and they need to be there. Absolutely. Do not force anybody to work at home, right?
Yep.
And then the people that work at home, it's like anything in work. You say, okay, here's what we expect out of you. You got to keep doing the deliverables. And if they do take a hit in productivity, my first thing on that would not be to accept it, would just be to say, look, here's where you're not cutting it, so we need to bring you back into the office.
Sure. So
we can get that productivity back. And absolutely, that's well within reason. Unless you want to correct that, it's kind of like we'll give you now this is just a new dynamic, that's all. So if the person values his time, they're going to get their act together. And if not, they're going to have to come back in. If they don't want to do that, then you let them go. This is just business. So that's how I see how you mitigate that. And your point being that regardless of that, you're still going to maybe take a little bit of hit in productivity, but that's how you would mitigate it. That's how I would do it. I think that's pretty simple too.
No, totally.
And, yeah.
But I also think,
and I think.
Go ahead. Sorry. Keep going.
Go ahead. No.
No, I was going to change the topic a little bit, so keep going.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I was just going to say that, just kind of following up on the whole real estate thing, the commercial real estate. There will be some management of that. If you have a policy like that, you're going to have some space for some people, whatever. And that might be the toughest. But, when I look at these things, I want to make sure I'm dotting all the I's and crossing the T's. So that piece would still be out there, but I think that's easily manageable. The bottom line is I think a lot of these companies would be able to, in many cases, cut their office space in half. And that's huge savings.
Yep.
Huge. And we haven't even talked about all, people's personal lives and the quality of their life going up, and the fact that they're not going to have to drive 5 days a week for an hour each way or whatever. I mean, that alone for me, if I had to do that, just that, taking 2 hours out of my day where I'm not stuck in a car, I think would relieve a lot of stress in my life.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I think in a lot of cases, some people end up working during those commute times. So you end up getting more hours out of a person, right?
Well, that's what they found in a study in San Antonio, actually, Kevin. Yeah, is that people were more productive.
Yeah. Well,
in some cases, they were even kind of sort of working less hours, like sometimes maybe 6 or 7, but they were doing it, like to your point, 3 or 4 hours in the morning, doing stuff with the kids, whatever, later at night, because and you were talking about it, but we all had that internal clock that we're wired differently.
Yeah.
So this allows people to be their very best and not waste time in a car. Two things that are very important.
Sure. Well, and I also think, though, it also allows companies to start innovating and looking for other innovative ways to do something. And that's why I think what you guys are doing at StreamTek is actually, like, sure, you guys have been around for a number of years now, but like if your 3,000 people were all coming to an office a day, now hypothetically you're going to let half of those work from home or wherever they want to be. You need to use like a service like you guys to actually make some of these big announcements or these events or these quarterly meetings relevant to people and exciting that they want to watch. Because you're right, the boring webinar with the person in the bottom corner, if they're even shown at all, as you flip through PowerPoint slides, sucks. People fall asleep. They don't care. They don't remember, right?
Oh,
they don't watch
tune
it,
out.
right? Yeah. But if you can make it
we all
engaging.
I tune out.
Sure.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah, and that's just the way we're built. We're wired. Everyone knows that. That's why I use that Super Bowl example, right?
Sure.
And when you think about it, you go, yeah, that's true. Even the Super Bowl is like, well, if you're a football fan, right? Or the seventh game in the NBA Finals, right? If all you had was one white shot on the court, But yes, exactly. So, and you're right. In fact, a finer point on that, Kevin, is that companies now are coming up because of this. They have no choice, but they have to, in a sense, stream messages to their employees in ways they didn't have to before. So, yes, those new ways will come out. I look at it, I think, myself, and this would be less work for us, but I think it may very well. I think companies should just look at they have their own TV channel, really, quite frankly, both to the outside and the inside. And the more live content you put on there, the better it's going to be. I see that as a potential down the road. And when it gets to that point, the bigger companies will not be hiring us. They'll just have an internal production. And, the bigger companies do. I mentioned FedEx before. FedEx was one of the first people that did that, back in the 90s, when they had to deal with through satellite and closed circuit, very expensive. But I think a lot of companies, because of this distance and everybody being all over the place or at home, are going to be kind of funneled into some model where they're going to be communicating that way. And if all you're doing it is with a webcam or whatever, man, you're in trouble. So I think that thought process is going to be there to create, kind of like I've told event planners, I said, you're going to, and some corporate communications people, you're going to turn from a corporate communications person to a TV producer. That may be the future. I mean, to some degree, I'm putting that in quotes.
No, it's interesting because I think so many companies or people now are launching a podcast. It seems to be, podcast is almost like the new blog. And I think the podcast market is getting so saturated. I think more and more people are going to go to video as kind of the next step to that and evolution of that, especially now that a lot of their audience or people, they're going to be going after either getting their message out to their internal employees and or their potential clients or their clients. And I think more and more people nowadays are building businesses that geographical borders don't matter, right? That they want clients everywhere, on every country and every part of the globe, right? I get not all industries can do that, but a lot of people can say like, well, I don't care if my customer is next door to me or halfway around the world, right? I need to get the same message or maybe different messaging out to them. And I think some of the best ways to do that is with video.
That's right. And do a broadcast quality. Don't stream it. So
sure.
And think about if you're a software developer or something like that, and you have a whole new product you want to introduce, right? And your marketing team wants to do it.
Totally.
And there's all sorts of old school ways you used to do that. But now, why not go live with someone interviewing people in a cool place in your thing? And maybe that person interviewing them is an industry writer for a tech magazine or whatever.
Sure.
And create a sense of something happening here that's fun. And right now we're going to go over to Lizzie, who's got, I'm here with the software programmer, and she's kind of irreverent and fun and whatever. But yeah, why not this way? Now this is to the outside world, but now in the past they may have had a user thing or something where people came in and they introduced stuff and showed people or whatever. No, that's not going to happen now. In fact, quite frankly, from our standpoint, that was never the better. We think there's some ways that doing broadcast instead of bringing people in is actually superior anyways, but that's a different discussion. But there's so much you can do too. Remember, this isn't just like TV. This is online. So while people are watching it, you can poll them, you can have Q&A, you can have chat, you can have buttons or links to other stuff or more material or whatever. So it's like it's a hybrid approach, really, is how we look at it. It's like TV and the online virtual components kind of wrapped into one.
No, I think that's really great. But we're kind of coming to the end of the show, so how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself, Greenworks, and StreamTek Productions?
Sure. Yep. So we will go anywhere and talk with anyone and broadcast anyone. We really enjoy this. And to get a hold of us is pretty easy. Our website is StreamTekPro.com, and the tech is a T-E-K. It's not a T-E-C-H. So it's StreamTek. That's StreamTekPro.com. And StreamTekProductions.com will also get you there. So either one. And I can be reached via email at Jim@StreamTekPro, again, StreamTek.pro. And our phone number is, you can reach me at 303-517-9279. And we are actually located in Golden, Colorado, which is just outside Denver. But again, that's just because we can be here. we go on location, and our gear's kind of stored here. And these days, the nice thing is it's easy to get from A to B, isn't it?
Totally.
I
know, yeah.
Yeah. So we can get set up really quick these days. And the other thing I got to say, Kevin, man, it's really nice because the air is so clean. My view at Denver is just outstanding these days. So anyway.
No, that's great, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. You as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.